Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really pleased to have with me a friend and colleague. I said perhaps a competitor, but a very good friend and a person of like mind, Kerry Lutz. At least we're certainly not completely of like mind because we're two separate individuals and individualists, I would say. But certainly the one thing that we do have in common is the quest for optimal freedom of the or at least freedom and responsibility for the individual. And Kerry he's had a very mixed, very, let's say, diverse is a better choice of words, career. He's been a lawyer, he's been an entrepreneur, and now he's a radio talk show host. He really became interested in Austrian economics back in around 1977 or so, and so he's really pursued his interest along those lines on the radio. And I just recently ran into Kerry for the first time in New York at the Hard Asset Show. And it's really a pleasure to have learned to know him. I'm really happy to have you with me today, Kerry. Welcome.
Hey, Jay, it's great to be on, and I'm drinking a double gulp in your honor and in honor of personal freedom, a soon-to-be outlawed, banned beverage in New York City.
Yes, indeed. As I understand it, our mayor here, I think it's our mayor, wants to make it illegal to drink more than so much Coke. I guess Diet Coke as well in a given day?
I think it's sugar beverages, soft drinks, and sweetened juices. Mm-hmm. And he thinks that 16 ounces is enough. And if you want any more than that, you'll have to buy a refill.
I see. So you just have to probably ends up benefiting the beverage companies that produce this stuff because you're going to end up paying more per ounce.
Yeah, and now they're coming after popcorn in movie theaters and milkshakes, and what's next?
What is next? What do you think? Speculate a bit.
Well...
Cameras in our bedrooms.
Currency controls, for sure.
Well,
we know that's coming. You know, they're just tightening the noose. Now they've got guys going around the airports asking you if you're on an international flight, do you have more than $10,000 in your pocket that you haven't declared? You know, they're just tightening the noose, one freedom at a time, and they'll distract you with going after what you're eating, while at the same time they're imposing additional reporting requirements, whatever it takes to wring out the maximum amount of milk from the cows that produce the juice that keeps the system going.
Yeah. How did we get into this, Kerry? I mean, it was certainly the antithesis of what our founding fathers had in mind. Limited government. Government wasn't supposed to do much of anything except protect our borders, perhaps, and make sure that you had a legal system that enforced the contracts. How have we gone wrong? Why has this happened to us?
Well, I think a lot of it's human nature, and a lot of it's what happens in empires. I think that on certain levels, our children, and that's my generation, baby boomers, spoiled by their parents, wanting them to have it better than they've ever had it before in the absence of suffering. I think prosperity corrupts, and then people want things, and the government's there to give it to them. And once they start giving, how do you stop? It's like
once you accept that notion that there is a free lunch, that you can get something for nothing, or that maybe it has to be paid for, but it needs to be the other guy that pays for me and my pleasures and my life, then I guess once you've headed down that slippery slope, where do you go from there? I know Ian McAvity has talked about we're at the point now in America where 49.5% of the population votes for a living and 50.5% work for a living, and that's going to change in the other direction very shortly as my generation, your generation, I think I'm a little older than you, I'm at the leading edge of the baby boomers. We'll be the first ones to really sock it to this country's budget. You know, we all want to have something for nothing. It's human nature. I guess you're right about that, but certainly I would suggest, and I'd like your idea on this, that when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, that really paved the way for this illusion that we could have something for nothing because credit suddenly became so readily available. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it was kind of the final nail in the coffin because it was a very limited gold standard that only applied to international trade between countries, but it was the last fig leaf. And once they no longer had to worry about that, then they were free, pretty much unfettered, to make unlimited numbers of currency units and then buy votes, and it really went downhill from there because I don't think the standard of living, I think it's decreased by 50% at least since 1970. There's a lot of things that went wrong with the country after 1971, after that act. And while you can't trace them back directly, there certainly appears to be a relationship to it. As with all societies, the Byzantines, the Romans, every empire debases its currency eventually, and the result is always the same.
Yeah, and we're seeing, as we've had Todd Walker, I should say Walker Todd, economist at the Federal Reserve, on our former Federal Reserve economist and attorney who was on our show a 3 weeks ago, talking about the middle class, the decline in the middle class, for sure, since the high mark was in the late 60s, I think early 70s, and then from then on, shortly after, we started increasing the money supply very rapidly with the when gold was taken off of the international gold standard, then that sort of freed everybody up. The U.S. could start to spend on expansion, on socialism, on foreign wars, and the whole world started going on a credit binge, it seems to me. And Kerry, it seems that we've had John Perkins on this show. He talked about how America's policy in the post-World War II era was to get third world countries indebted, so they had to sell us their raw materials. And you have people, you sort of have people over the barrel when you are the creditor and they are the debtor, don't you? And the whole American public is now is so much in debt. And all of this, of course, came about with the liberalization of credit, which seemed to occur very rapidly after Nixon took us off the gold standard. Well, I want to get into. We only have 3-4 minutes here, Kerry, and I want to ask you a little bit more. Talk a little bit about your show. What is the show called, and how can people access it?
It's called the Financial Survival Network, and financialsurvivalnetwork.com is the website. We're on iTunes. We're on YouTube. You just have to type in Financial Survival Network, and it'll all come up. We're getting, like you, hundreds of thousands of downloads a month. Amazing interest in a very short period of time, just like you.
Yeah, it really is. There really is a thirst for information outside of the mainstream, because I think people generally believe they're not getting the full story from the mainstream press. But let's get some of the things that you talk about. You also are on I think a regular station or two in the United States, I think in Connecticut and Greenwich or someplace?
Yeah, we're on 1490 WGCH, which is in Greenwich, which I call the belly of the beast, because there's more hedge fund managers here, Wall Streeters and other ne'er-do-wells than any place else except Manhattan.
Yeah. It's a very wealthy neighborhood, no doubt about that. Well, I want to ask you about the Triple Lutz Report. It's something that's going over real big on your show. Tell us, what is that, the Triple Lutz Report?
Well, I was thinking of a name for a report to do commentary, and my trainer, who's from Hungary, who I don't work out with enough, she said, why don't you call it the Triple Lutz Report? So I said, yeah, I like that name. And it's somewhat of a rant, but it's a commentary on a particular event or a series of events taking place, like when Bernanke met and instantly the price of gold yet again got slammed. And like FDR said, there's no coincidences when it comes to politics. If that price got slammed, then they wanted it slammed. And I'm kind of fed up with manipulated markets, because markets exist for price discovery to give people information to make decisions. And when they're manipulated, when they're totally perverted and become political tools, they lose that value, and the public, the country, the world suffers as a result.
Yeah. Well, if information or misinformation is fed into the marketplace, then of course the results will not be as efficient as they would be if people were, had a free flow of truthful information to make their decisions by. But yeah, your Lutz Report 194 sort of implies, just from the headlines, and I didn't have the time to listen to it. I'm sorry. To Ben Bernanke, that his speech, the things he said, probably caused the gold to tank on that given day. Whether or not that's true, it certainly is true that the policymakers, I think it's true, I think I'm safe in saying it's true, that policymakers don't want people really, and Alan Greenspan actually himself said this, do not want people to start losing confidence in the dollar and gaining confidence in gold. So clearly the spin has to be, we're in control, we're going to fix things, everything's going to be all right, trust us, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like they're trying to say that wet sidewalks cause rain, all right? So high gold price causes a loss of faith in the currency? I don't think so.
Yeah,
the reason gold goes up is because people are losing faith. So all they do by manipulating it is increase demand and fool the market, not necessarily, and let these sovereigns come in and grab it at discounted prices. It's like a rent-controlled apartment in New York. Imagine being able to rent an apartment for $1,000 that should go for $3,000 to $5,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Well, imagine being able to buy precious metals at probably around a third to 60% of what they should be trading at based on historic trends. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, well, it's there are those people, of course, that are not paying full attention, or at least they are, but they're also seeking information outside of the mainstream. Now, Kerry, that's what you seek to do on your show. I seek to do that. Many people are asking questions these days, and I'm sorry we don't have more time. We have to have you back again sometime soon because Walter Williams, Greg Hunter, Chris Duani, a whole bunch of people you've had on your show have a lot of very interesting things to say. Tell our listeners once again where they can go to listen to your show.
Sure, Jay. And hey, thanks so much for having me on. It's financialsurvivalnetwork.com, and I'm looking forward to working closer with you in the future, Jay.
Likewise. Thanks so much for being with us today.